Let's do it. I mean, we are rolling.
We're rolling. We're always rolling, Sammy. I hope you had a nice holiday. I hope everybody had nice holidays. Tyson looks like he got a haircut, so that's great.
Well, I got the haircut. I also got the beard trimmed because it was looking a little too ragamuffiny. And quite frankly, I'm starting to get enough gray in my beard that unless I keep it a little bit tighter, it starts to look a little bit raggedy.
You could look distinguished like me though. Like you just find someone who can shape it properly. I mean,
And
that's all
you
it
just
is.
have to get the Bucky's hat. And the Bucky hat really pulls it all together.
I mean, I do love Buc-ee's.
Yeah, my buddy comes up from New Orleans every year, and around this time, and we meet and be hippies in the city for a little bit, and every single time he hits like Tennessee, he's like, "Hey, stopping by Bucky's. What do you want?" And it's always like, "Just get me a hat."
I
Yeah,
gotta
that,
have it.
And
Bring you
I'm
some
a big
beaver
fan of this
nuggets.
hat.
Beaver
It's
nuggets are the
comfortable.
best.
Yeah, it's like $14. So, all right, you guys want to do a podcast here?
let's do a podcast.
All right, let's do this, man. Let's let's see. You know, every single time I forget the one thing that we need to do, which is hit this button before we start, and it's you know it is what it is. But
Cold open, baby. Freezing cold open.
Davis returns it. Oh, it's Muhammad Ali. Oh my goodness. Oh, Ali's done it. 3-1.
The big switch. Gray can't keep it in. It goes out, and that is it. In 2025, Vermont is the king of soccer. And the Vermont Green win their first ever USL2 title. And green is the color of victory once again in Burlington, Vermont.
hey, it's the United in Green podcast. You have Mike again as usual, and we have Sam. How you doing?
Doing good, Mike. Doing good. Glad to be able to relive some fond memories and talk about what's to come with our special guest.
Well, yeah, we have a special guest, and we'll get to him in 1 second. But I do have to introduce a returning champion. I feel really I kind of disconnected from the group since the last time because the last time it was just the two of you. It was the Tyson and Sam takeover, but the returning champion is Tyson. Tyson, how you doing, buddy? How's your holiday? And how have you been since the last time we talked?
I mean, my holiday was fantastic. Got some, in my mind, well-deserved time off, so that was good. But they, I still think that the cruelest week of any year is the time between Christmas and New Year's, where it's like, am I going to be trying to take all of this time off? Am I only going to have to work like a couple of weird days in between there? And then everything that you put off for during those weeks comes back around after New Year's. You reconnected in January, and then that means that you've got a whole lot of work to do, and that's what I've been grinding through this past little bit. But I'm excited to be talking to you, Mike.
Excellent. Yeah, you're the one and only who's excited to be talking to me. But that's okay. You know, my wife has kind of just banished me to the basement at this point, so this is where we're at. But let's introduce our special guest. Last time we talked, we had this gentleman on. I think it was the first episode of the season, and he had just been announced as the head coach of our favorite football club here in Vermont. And by the end of it, we had him promise that when they won it all, that he would come back on. And here he is, Chris Taylor. How are we doing?
Yeah, good, good. Sorry it took so long to actually come back, but the season in the summer went so long that we we were forced to get back to our real lives like really, really quickly, quicker than we expected. So been busy since then, but happy to come back on and talk about it. But we talked a lot about it after the season and never get tired of talking about winning.
You know what? I think that when we kind of put things out there for guests, we always try and do the best we can to get them on immediately. Like you said, everybody's lives do kind of get in the way, and you had to kind of regroup really quickly and get ready for your college season. It kind of just flowed. I'm sure it just flowed right in, but there were a lot of cool opportunities that you had, and you got to speak to some really cool folks, and we tuned into all of it. So it's still an exciting thing for all of us, and every time we get to talk about it, it still seems new. So. I hope we don't bore anybody with any details of things that they may already know. And we're not, I don't think we're going to be breaking any new ground tonight, but it is great just to kind of regroup and restart the conversation for this next season coming up. We're fresh off, we're kind of not fresh off, but we'll say fresh off one of the most remarkable achievements in this club's history, or the most remarkable achievements, which is the 2025 USL League Two National Championship. And as we've talked about before, the Green aren't just a soccer club or a football club. We're a project built around the sustainability, community, identity, and now we have the silverware to kind of go with it, right? So let's just kind of start from the beginning, and how talk about how this title was won, what made this team special. Can you kind of bring us through how this team kind of came together, and if it was different than the previous seasons, and if the feel was different going into that season?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of things that felt different, while also a lot of things felt continuous. And I think it's really important to mention the continuity that we had with people like Musa and Zach Zengi, that really brought, they've been around for a few years at that point, and it almost felt like they knew it was going to be their last season. They knew they were going on to professional careers. So I think two leading lights like that were very, very determined and very hungry to make sure the group understood what the objective was. We talked about trophies in the very first meeting, winning as many trophies as possible. And, I know you're supposed to say that we didn't think we could win them all or whatever, but we did. The level of talent within the team was there. Adam Pfeiffer did what he does. He brought, what felt like a college all-star team to Vermont. But yeah, I mean, a couple of guys that drove home what it meant to play for the Green, play for the fans, play for the state in Zengi and Musa. And then you add in, the national champions of UVM, from the season before, your Nick Hersigs, Ryan Zelafros, Maxi Kissels, amongst others, who they brought this thing of like, yeah, this is what we do. We win for Vermont, So I think that little mix there of the bond with Vermont Green and then the championship of UVM coming together was a big driving force. And then, you can't fail to mention just some of the superstars that lit up the whole summer. Julian Laborde might be the most talented footballer we've seen in Vermont. From just not only a stylistic point of view, but also the man for the big occasion, and there was obviously some things down the stretch where we could only play him a certain amount of minutes and things like that. He was under restrictions, but, we made it work. And people who didn't play in the playoffs, but obviously got us there, like, again, Joe Picotto might be one of the top players we've ever seen, Stefan GK, and so I think we just had the right mix at the right time. And then as we got into playoffs, we were thin. We were thin from a squad point of view, but and this is going to sound like a slight to anyone who wasn't there in playoffs, and I don't mean it that way because a lot of them wanted to be there, but it felt like the lads who were there for playoffs, I was calling them the true believers, because a lot of them made sacrifices to be there. They maybe pissed off their college coaches to be there, or they changed plans, or they were taking flights back and forth to make sure that they satisfied all the obligations they had. But so if you knew some of the sacrifices or the effort some of these lads made to play in these playoff games, they really were the ones who they were like, we're making this happen. And when they made those types of sacrifices to be in that locker room right before the final and on the pitch for the final, that's when you know that you can win those types of things. So so many things went into it, but we felt from day one we could do this, and we didn't over talk about winning the national championship, but we certainly mentioned that we felt we could do it.
Yeah, and I guess kind of as well, Chris, just listening to you talk, when you look back at teams, everyone kind of wants to think about, what was the most talented, or, like you said, you kind of were talking about trophies from day one. Do you think this was the most talented squad to kind of, come through Vermont Green? And, I just want to give you the opportunity as well. Were there any maybe kind of unsung heroes who kind of, maybe didn't get a lot of shine, maybe didn't get a lot of playing time? You mentioned like Joe Picoto, who really kind of stood out in your eye.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good bit of debate on whether it is the most talented team, and I think within the coaches who've been around since day one, that second season team that had like Gio Probo and people like that, that was the team that had the most points before this year, but it didn't make playoffs. Ironically, that was kind of the team to beat. But this year's team, I'm biased. I thought it was the most talented, and it was the most well-rounded. But it wasn't without its there was some tough moments where there were times when we couldn't fill the bench, because you get to that point mid-summer, July time, when college coaches get a bit twitchy and they want their guys back, or guys just miss home or whatever it is. So we had to use a lot of players, and I think you guys know this, but we didn't use the same starting 11 in any game. We changed it every game, which is remarkable, and that's a testament to a lot of things, but it's definitely a testament to guys who you mentioned, Sam, in terms of possibly unsung heroes who, maybe if we had the free will to choose whoever we wanted, regardless of freshness, regardless of physical condition, regardless of whatever, they maybe weren't in the strongest 11, but when called upon, they were ready to go. So the first name that comes to mind for me by far is Diego Rived, who was there from day one in the summer and was there throughout, and he didn't play a ton, but he started the final. When when we only had one recognised centre-back in the squad, and it was against Albany Rush, I said to Diego, I think we might need your centre-back, and he just kind of winked at me and said, all right. And Diego was such a brilliant personality, brought it every day, and he's a brilliant player, like unbelievable player. But when you've got some of the best central midfielders in the country, it's difficult. So Diego was someone that I absolutely loved and trusted. And again, you're starting the national championship and he's in the team and he gives everything and, takes the yellow card when he needs to take the yellow to stop attacks and gives a bit for the team, and just a brilliant lad. And a special mention to someone like Alex Hall, who lit up the playoffs with his attacking play. But we played him at right back the first few games because we didn't have one. We didn't have a right back in the squad. Because injuries, people had left, whatever. And Alex went on to be one of the best attacking players in college soccer this year. Obviously winning the national championship there, and that lad has got a future as a pro. But I asked him to play right back, and he just didn't even say a word. He just kind of shrugged and went, all right. And I actually talked to him yesterday, and we mentioned about him playing right back, and he said, yeah, whatever you need. And I think that was probably the biggest thing, is the there was a lot of ego on the team in a really positive way. But there was no ego at the same time when it came to what did the team need, and when it came to rotation, when it came to hey, you're going to be on the bench today, and obviously through the playoffs, because of the narrative of what the bench was doing, lads actually kind of wanted to be on the bench because they were going to get brought on to win the game, and people were kind of happy to be on the bench, but. I'm probably neglecting to mention a few people here or there in terms of unsung heroes, but Diego for sure just springs to mind, and Jude well, Michelle, like in terms of personality and just what you bring in training that nobody sees, and stepping in when Nicholas was gone. Loved Jude to death, and again made sure he was around when we needed him. So there's so many little stories like those.
Now, Chris, when we talked to you in advance of the season, you made a very big point to talk about the fact that home games at Virtue Field, they are different than, any other team in our division's home games, apart from maybe Western Mass, but they're still not fully up there. You know, After having gone through the season, we have the miracle at Lusitano. You know, did your kind of expectations as to what a playoff atmosphere at Virtue Field was going to be throughout the entire playoffs and championship?
My mind was blown. To be honest, I've never experienced anything like it, and I think there was a real change. And again, this might sound a little negative in a way, but I think there was a real change in terms of the atmosphere being fun and bubbly and nice, to this is a cauldron and we're going to help you win the game. There was a clear shift. We always compared, like when we felt we had a good crowd or a good atmosphere, we kept saying, yeah, this was good, but it wasn't the Open Cup. That was like the barometer. The Open Cup games were like, this is it. We hit that playoff game against Hudson Valley at first, and we were 1-0 down, and there was a little period, right, with Hudson Valley and then Motown, where we scored goals in really short periods of time. And I have no doubt in my mind that the crowd assisted most of those goals, because the other team folded, because the crowd got loud when we were losing. I think in the past, if we'd have given up goals, because it was like, more, and again, I don't want to sound like disrespectful, but it was almost like a day out, it was a nice thing that people like, oh, that sucks when you give up a goal. Whereas we gave up a goal against Hudson Valley, and it was like, no, here we go. It's our time now. And we hit them bang, 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 because the crowd was so loud that their players folded. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And Motown, who arguably were the best team in the country on paper, and they were probably the one team that could rival us in terms of star-studded names and in terms of, the ability on the field, they folded. When we go 2 goals down, and the crowd, there was a moment where the crowd was kind of counting for the goalkeeper when he had the ball on his hands, and it sped him up. And it sounds stupid, but like, that goal he played at UNC, and the crowd was influencing him, in terms of his decision making. And then we score, and all of a sudden they're like, this massive crowd that is really loud just watched us make a mistake and give up a goal. And now in the back of the mind a little bit, it's like, what if we blow this in front of this crowd? And I think the crowd sensed it, and I think the atmosphere was certainly more feverish. Obviously the numbers were there, right? The numbers was completely different in terms of people on the hill, people on the fence, all of that. That was unbelievable. But just from a noise perspective, there was something different. And it felt like the connection had finally been made, in terms of influencing the game on the pitch. I think there were portions of the crowd that tried to influence the game on the pitch, but now it actually felt like the entire capacity was trying to influence the game. And that's when you start to feel like you've got something that can't be replicated everywhere, because that power, they obviously, as a Liverpool fan, they talk about at Anfield when you go and attacking the cop end and the cop will suck the ball over the goal line, and it kind of felt like that a little bit, that the crowd could actually help us score a goal. So yeah, I can't even say that it blew my expectations out of the water, and not just the final. The final was obviously ridiculous in terms of the demand, but from the very first playoff game on, it was, something truly special. And I think we'll see this type of thing in the future for us, but it'll never be like this one, because this was when we really like made that connection.
I think that yeah, I think that like expectations for coming seasons are gonna be a bit different from the crowd, and I think that puts a different kind of pressure on this club, on the players, the future players, the coaches, the owners, and especially us in the supporters section. But Tyson kind of jumped over the top of where I was going to go with my next question, because we're seeing all these new teams popping up in USL two, and we already know that like a playoff run in USL two is just absolutely ruthless. There's the short turnarounds, and these guys, like, it's already a shortened, condensed season. They're not used to playing this many games, and so you end up with these short turnarounds, like super super high pressure, especially playing in front of your home fans, unfamiliar opponents. So how did you, through that playoff run, how did you manage like player mentality, as like the stakes kept on like rising from round to round? Because like I think that as a supporters group, um, I think that when we talked, in between games, that we as supporters had to kind of up our game too. Whether it's being louder, whether it's coming up with new songs, whether it's trying to push individual players on. So from like a coaching standpoint, how do you manage the mentality as those stakes kept on rising from round to round? Because like it is that short turnaround, and they have to stay on.
Yeah, just really, really difficult. Because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that most people don't know, right? So I'll kind of digress a little bit, but we don't always have the freedom to pick whoever we want, right? We're trying to manage relations with college coaches, rightfully so, by the way. Not a complaint in any way. They're their players. We're kind of loaning them a little bit, or we're like the international team. I kind of see it as like we're the national team, where I believe we have a responsibility to do what's best for them long term, and not do what's best for us on the day, right? But that can lead to some frustration. I'll give an example that's outside the playoffs. We had the kind of back-to-back games with AC Connecticut, right? And that was in a period where, and we were quite poor in the home game against AC Connecticut. But we went on the road, and we actually dropped points with them. But we actually played pretty well. But that was a weird period where players were leaving. They were in the midst of leaving. New players were arriving. So people like Gabe Fernandez, Alex Hall had just joined the group for those games. We didn't really know them. They were young kids from Washington. They hadn't played a lot as freshmen. Knowing now what we know about them, we knew they were tremendous players. But, at the time, they just kind of showed up. The Maryland boys were kind of on their way out, and we were trying to manage the team. And I know, like, you guys on here, because I listened, we caught a bit of criticism from you guys over those couple of games, which, I thought at the time probably wasn't quite accurate. But it's when you're inside the group, right, and you know what's going on. We were really struggling at that point, not only for just numbers, but when you go into AC Connecticut and it's 7 hours on the bus and it's 92 degrees down there, things aren't just that simple, and you batter them for the whole game, but you just can't get a goal. And it's not an excuse, but like, all of our guys playing the Big Ten and the ACC, they're not traveling 7 hours on a bus day of the game. You know what I mean? They're going 2 days in advance, and they're training, they're acclimate, and they're gone all week. And so we were in a difficult period then, and we also were managing the relationships with the college coaches. So that was happening in the regular season. Now, amplify that in the postseason when you're playing Friday, Sunday, where these guys do not play that turnaround in college, right? So I was being, we were constantly talking to these college coaches, and they're like, well, all right, they can play 90 minutes, but over the entire weekend, you know, or they can play one game, not the other, whatever it is. So it was really difficult to juggle, and we were having to take the risk of saying, hey, we're not going to play you on Friday. We're going to hopefully win and we'll play you Sunday. Now, trying to convince a player of that when you might lose and you might not play is mad. But again, you know, the funny thing is, like, the game, I can't remember what game it was. It might have been Motown or it might have been Dothan. Or could have been any of them. But it was one of the games where we had all the fans on the fence behind the bench. And I was catching loads of shit from the fans on the fence being like, why aren't you playing him? Why aren't you playing him? And I was like, I'm not allowed. You know what I mean? Like, we're under these restrictions. So the one good thing was we were at home, right? If you've got to travel and you can only travel, like, you can't travel a player and say, hey, you're not going to play Friday, but hopefully you'll play Sunday. If you're on the road and you're going 10 hours like Lionsbridge did, you know what I mean? At home, it gave us that luxury of like, hey, you're around anyway. We might have to leave you out of the squad, but you'll be in the squad Sunday, or we'll have to rotate the team, all that. So I will say special credit has to go to Pfeiffer on all of that, because before the season started, he talked about playoffs and almost having 2 11s, one for the Friday, one for the Sunday. We didn't quite do that, but that was his vision from the start of like, let's have this massive squad, because in playoffs, nobody, availability is really difficult. And we were flying people in just for the game. They weren't training, and we were like flying for Sunday. If we win Friday, we'll get you there for Sunday. So he had this real vision of this depth and this rotation and just winning on freshness. And obviously we won games really late. And I think that's a testament to that plan being successful, because the players, when you bring in Maxi Kissel off the bench at halftime, because I know Tatavine could really only play 45 minutes because his knee was a bit knackered. So it's like, all right, let's play our No, who's fantastic, but let's play him as long as we can. And then you hit them with Kissel at halftime, and it's like, Jesus Christ, what a luxury. I think we brought a Jagby on in a couple of games, like a Jagby's one of the best players in the country, and you're bringing him off the bench. I remember the conversation with Ryan Zelfro before the final. I was like, you're going to be on the bench. And he looked at me like, are you messing? And I'm like, Ryan, the reason I want you on the bench is because I want to, when we need to win the game, I want you on the pitch. And he looked at me like, yeah, you're still an idiot. But, bringing Ryan Zelfro on the 60th minute is like, wow, what a top talent that you're able to bring on. Obviously, there was the Julian factor, the O'Malley factor. You're bringing a lad who had a Generation Adidas contract on to win your games at Western Mass or wherever. We just were built for the playoffs. It's not something that you need a bit of luck along the way, but I think we had a really good plan of how it was going to work. But it's really, really difficult. I mean, to be able to do that took so many moving parts, and we're constantly on the phone calling this player or calling this coach or booking this flight or whatever. So it was so many moving parts, and it was very stressful. But fortunately, the players we were able to bring in helped us win.
Yeah, and Chris, you mentioned Owen O'Malley, so I was going to ask something else, but I feel like we have to talk about Owen. Obviously, his present of mind was able to sign, a USL League One deal today. But can you just kind of talk about how much he meant to the team? He wasn't someone who was starting day in and day out. But I guess, what really stood out about him when he kind of maybe first came in, and just how much of an impact did he have on this squad, whether it be on the field or, off the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, Owen, you could talk about Owen all night, couldn't you, in a lot of different ways. He's such a character. And, it was a tough summer for Owen, to be honest, because the idea was come back, let's get you back to, the levels that you were once at, and let's get you back to the highest level. The reality was he wasn't that fit when he came in because of his situation. It was difficult. He plays in the very first game at Boston City, does really well, contributes to a goal. And you're like, all right, yeah, here we go. And then he gets injured. You know, he rolls his ankle really badly in training and he's out for a while, and that really killed all of his momentum. And that was difficult for Owen, you know, mentally. He was in such a tough spot because no matter what anyone says, he's the lad who had the MLS contract, right? So the expectations are so high. And, you know, we can all say, oh, it doesn't matter, but it does. That's a lot of weight to carry on your shoulders. So, you know, when we got towards the end, Owen was frustrated, no doubt, and you know, wanted to play more. And I understood his frustration, you know. But what was great was we got to the end of the season and he started to get going in training. And obviously, he was kind of a right back, left back, kind of a wing back player. But maybe he didn't really have the physical capacity at the time to be able to do that in the summer. So in training, he just starts going left wing. And obviously, he's just got this dribbling ability and this creative ability. And he's a wild card, you know. And it's the most obvious thing I'll say, but the best thing that ever happened to him was Western Mass, because that was a real throw of the dice, right? We're dead and buried, you know. It felt like it was done. And I remember saying to Lee, our assistant, Lee Williamson, at Western Mass, and we're like, I'm going to throw Owen on. And we were kind of like, you know, can we do this? And I was like, listen, if someone's going to score a ridiculous goal, and I didn't think he'd do it, I was like, it's probably going to be him. I was like, he'll do something stupid, like he'll shoot from miles away, and it might go in. And, you know, it was a complete, you know, let's play the lottery. Not just him, we were doing everything at that point. Alex Hall's at right back, Zelafro's on, Brandon Parrish's on, Labo's on, Mo Ibra's on, everybody's on. It's like, we're going for it. And when he hit that goal, I think it's like, that's the moment that his career needed. And I'm so happy it happened to him, you know, because other people could have scored that goal and they would have deserved it. But did they need it as badly as Owen needed it? No, they didn't. And that goal sparked something in all of us, right? That one gave us the belief that we can do anything at any time, because Owen O'Malley just stuck one in the top corner like that and snatched the league from the jaws of defeat a little bit. And it also, I think, reignited the belief in himself. You know, that he was a brilliant player, that he did have disability, and obviously went on throughout the playoffs and he embraced that super sub role where again he's like, yeah, bring me on to win the game, which he did. You know, he contributed to all the playoff games. So he's a larger than life character. Sometimes you want to kill him, but you can't help but love him. And I'm really happy for him that he's getting his opportunity again at the professional level, and I hope he takes it with both hands and shows everyone how talented he is. I think you know, he's matured a little bit, and you know, I'm really hopeful that he goes on as a brilliant season in Richmond.
And you know, Chris, I think that there's been a lot of talk, and obviously rightfully so, about the kind of amazing players that you've had on the squad, kind of like their growth throughout the year, all of the success in the postseason, things like that. Um, how do you think you have grown as a coach during this whole process? I mean, this is your first year fully in charge of the tactics, all this stuff, being the full-time head coach of the squad. You know, what changed for you kind of throughout the year, and how do you feel after having come through this, real uh,
Yeah, it was big for me. Like I'm not gonna lie about that. You know, at the end of the day, on paper, I'm a Division 3 college coach, coaching the best Division 1 players in the country. So it was a risk for everyone involved, right? It was a risk for Adam. It was a risk for the club because on paper, you know, you're not quite supposed to do that. Luckily, we all believed, and I believed I could do it, in terms of manage this team. But you know, inevitably, if something would have gone wrong early, it would have been, it's a Division 3 coach. Of course, it hasn't worked. You know what I mean? And I think there was a couple of things that happened along the way that, you know, gave me a little bit of confidence, because there's no doubt I went in being like, oh, is this going to be tough, you know, to convince some of these players. But I will say from day one with Vermont Green, because nothing's changed. I was still Division 3 coach when I joined. I'm still Division 3 coach now, and they were still Division 1 players. No, that's never been an issue for the players because one, they don't care, and two, I think they saw the desire and the passion and the work I put in on the training pitch, even when I was an assistant, to get the best out of them. So I think they appreciated that. But I think honestly for me, the Seacoast game at home, and I know Seacoast didn't have the season that anybody thought they were going to have, but at that time they were still a good team. They still had all the top players. And that was a little bit of a litmus test probably for me in terms of can we win that big game. And yes, we had beaten them before in that 1 year where we didn't make playoffs with that really good team, but we hadn't beaten them, we hadn't beaten them at home obviously, and they had ended our summer the year before. And they came in playing a bit of a different system, and we worked really, really hard on how we were going to manage that system and what we were going to do. And the players, I've never, at any level of any team I've ever coached, I have never seen a team buy in to the plan than that team. People like Enzo Dovlo, who just got drafted, was so committed to everything we asked them to do. A Jagby, like all of them. I know, like players who are attacking players, but we asked them to do very specific things from a defensive point of view. And obviously we ripped them apart. And we maybe ended their season that day because it put them into such a spiral. But I walked away from that a little bit being like, you know what? And I'm not saying I was questioning it, but you obviously have thoughts now and again. But I walked away from that being like, nobody cares. As long as you've got the right details and you coach them the way they need to be coached, nobody cares. And I think that was just maybe the one where the light bulb kind of came on of like, yeah, this is the right fit. We can do this. These good players don't care. As long as they see that you're prepared, you're organised, you're passionate, they'll listen to you because that's what makes them good players. They're not trying to fail. And so, I think that gave me the real confidence. I had confidence going in, don't get me wrong, but that took me over the edge of like, yeah, all right, I can coach the best players in the country and they will play for me. And I think we kind of obviously went on from there. And then, I think in the playoff run, one of the things I think I learned was to trust the players a lot. And I think about someone like Zach Zengi, who, is a fantastic player, had some good seasons for Vermont, but there was probably some frustration on his part and maybe on others that, we've got this brilliant player, but we maybe haven't seen him at his best. And the conversations I would have with him, just listening to him, trying to understand what he needed and listening to his thoughts on the game. And I learned just as much from him. And I think that got the best out of him. He felt that trust of like, nah, Zach, like, if you think this, you go do it, And I think I learned to have better conversations with players and not just be obsessed with tactics. The guys who I'm always kind of thinking of that I would talk to during a game, Brandon Marshall, centre-back, constantly talking to me during the game. What a brilliant guy, brilliant character, brilliant player. But, if I needed to get instructions, let's be honest, like Musa doesn't understand the Scouse accent as well as anybody else, so me shouting to Musa is never a good idea because he just goes, yes, coach, and he's like, I don't even know what he just said. So I've got to get it to Brandon, who's going to translate to everybody else in the team. And Brandon's such a good communicator, but yeah, just trusting the players and allowing them to be themselves. And, my pitch to the players always was, if you listen to me without the ball, you can be yourselves with the ball and we'll let you be creative, we'll let you express yourselves, we'll let you find the game, but you've got to let me guide you without the ball to how we're going to stop them and things like that. So just tons of learning moments, to be honest, but every bit of it made me so much better, and I'm grateful that the players, allowed me to grow alongside them through it all too.
So yeah, before we get into talking about what everybody really wants to hear, which is what's up with the Open Cup and what's up for next season. I just had a question about like the mission of the club in itself, and the players, and how do you it's kind of a two-part question, but like how do you introduce new players, like especially like those that are outside of Vermont that haven't been here before? How do you kind of introduce those players to the club, to Vermont, and to what the club represents? And on the backside of that, like, do you think that the model that Vermont Green has built, uh, do you think it challenges like the traditional ideas of what like a lower league soccer or football club can be? And like, has the club's success actually like amplified like the message off the field itself too? Like, because I mean these players, they come in not knowing anything about Vermont itself, and what kind of a state and what kind of a people New England are. So I think the club, it's always seemed like has intentionally brought players in to that will kind of not just put a good product on the field, but to push the mission of the club.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think one of the things is we don't require the players to agree with everything the club, I guess stands for or says or anything like that. What we do ask is that you're open minded and you try and educate and learn, and understand why. It's not, and this is going to sound counterproductive to the mission. We don't always talk about the mission with the players, like when we're as a group, but what we're really adamant about, and Adam and I have pushed this from day one, if we want the message of the club to get out there, we got to win games because it gets it so much further. As we saw, obviously win the national championship put us in a different stratosphere of media attention and just, becoming a bit more of a household name in US soccer. And now all of a sudden that what we stand for is out there more than ever. So I think our responsibility on the sporting side of things is to win as much as possible to make the team and the club and the mission go further. That's how I kind of see it. And I happen to believe in the mission wholeheartedly. It aligns with everything I believe in life. But we can't think that every single player from all corners of the globe are going to fully agree with every single part of what we do. But they're open-minded enough to listen, learn, and respect, which is all we'd ever ask, right? And I think, at the end of the day, there's a lot of players who are drawn to the club because it does align with what they think. And you think about the New York Times piece and the quotes that Victor Akum used in that, showing not only is he a brilliant footballer, but he's a highly intelligent person, and, the way he explained it. And Zach Zengi is someone who speaks so well about the mission and, what the club stands for. But I think overall, what the players understand is the club is for Vermont and the club's for the people of Vermont and the custodians of the club, right? For the time that they're there, and they're there to represent those people. And we talked about it in the locker room before almost every game at home, that the crowd are going to appreciate a lovely bit of skill. They're going to appreciate, Stefan GK doing some tricks and stuff like that. But they're also going to really, really appreciate, Joe Picoto absolutely smashing someone in the middle of the pitch after he's run 40 yards, because people in the stands are probably like, I can't do what Stefan GK can do. But if I had the chance, I'd run like Joe Picoto does, and I'd tackle like this guy because it would mean that much to me. And I think what we tried to imprint on the players is, you've got to play the way people in the stands would play if they had the chance to be you. And that's with heart, with passion, with drive, because again, we feel that people in Vermont are workers, they're grinders, they're people who, are going to work for everything they get, and they're going to try and do it with respect and care, and they're going to try and help the people around them. So you got to be a good teammate and things like that. So they're the things that we tried our best to get across to the guys. And then, if you can help with, things that matter in terms of, off the field, what you do. If we change a couple of habits in your daily life just because you've been educated by the club, that's a win as well. That's such a big thing. And then to answer your second part about does it change what lower league clubs can look like, I think it absolutely does. I think it shows what's possible. It's possible in every other part of the world. It should be possible in this country too. And I think what we've created in Vermont is kind of what I was used to growing up, right? People now in Vermont are going to be born into Vermont Green households, right? And you're not going to choose to be a Vermont Green fan. It's going to choose you because your old man supported them, or your mum supported them, or whatever, or your older brother or older sister supported them. And that's how you decide to support the club, is because it's a non-negotiable in your household a little bit, because it's part of your community, it's part of who we are, and that's when it becomes really organic, right? In terms of, oh no, we don't like Vermont Green because it's something to do on a Saturday. We like it because it's part of our life. It's part of and again, I'm going to get old and traditional here, but it's the dad taking his son to his first game, and that special moment of, I'm going to show you what I'm so passionate about, and we're going to share this passion together. Or it could be a mum taking their daughter to a game, vice versa, whatever combination it is. I think it's organic, right? It's becoming, it's what you do in Vermont. You support Vermont Green because Vermont Green is Vermont. And I think it shows that it's possible. And I said this, I think this was when we talked to Landon Donovan and Tim Howard. I was like, the traditional model in the US is to plop a team somewhere and hope that people gravitate towards it, rather than creating something that represents the people there. And that's what we're doing. And, again, we have a responsibility on the sporting side to represent the people, because the players are going to come and go. I'm going to come and go. But the club is going to be there forever, hopefully, and the people are going to be there forever. And it might not be the exact people, but it might be the generation below and the generation below. And they want to see what the older generation told them about when they were kids. And again, I related to supporting Liverpool, where, when in the 90s, when Liverpool were rubbish and doing what Man United are doing now and chasing, the glory days, I had to listen to my old man going on about, Graham Souness and Kenny Dalglish and, Stevie Highway and Alan Hansen, and how these players don't get it. Those players got it, right? And we don't want players that Liverpool had in the 90s, and we don't want players that Man United have got now either. But we do want that passing down of tradition and history and narrative from generation to generation, because that is what shapes your thinking about what the club is. So I truly believe that we started something special 4 years ago, right? But we're just making it better and better every year, which is the most important.
Yeah, and Chris, you kind of mentioned you have these D1, players who are probably, used to, amazing facilities and what have you, making these, round trip, bus trips. I have to ask, what is maybe one of those memories that, maybe once you're done coaching, you'll still remember something from that bus trip to Western Mass, and what was it just like to get to know the guys on a more personal level through those kind of long journeys?
Playing a Virtue is amazing and it's life changing, but the bus trips, mate, they're brilliant. They're so much fun. And I'll go back to the very first game away at Boston City, and obviously we had an influx of French players this year, and their personalities were so infectious. I know Tatavan, easily the funniest fella I've ever met in my life, and obviously we beat Boston City, which we expect to do, and we're like, yeah, no big deal. We're playing at this high school in Malden, Mass, or whatever it was, and not the fanciest place to ever play, and you're in this like middle school, general locker room getting changed, and we go in after the match. We've just won, first game of the season, nice job done, no big deal. And Stefan GK, Enzo, no, several other guys as well. The speakers go and they're dancing. They're basically in their underwear, waving the towels, dancing and all that, and they take forever to get changed and showered because they're dancing in the locker room for so long. they obviously, they're the last ones on the bus. Steph, a real big character. Last ones on the bus, but they got the speaker, the singing, the rapping, the dancing on the bus on the way home from most games was just fantastic. And the energy that this group had was really, really fun. Eskil, one of the funniest guys around as well. Joe Picotto, I know I've mentioned him a bunch of times, but a fantastic character. Just so many really funny guys. I unfortunately wasn't on the bus to or from Western Mass. I actually drove to the game because I had to go to a recruiting event the next day for my day job, my college job. So I wasn't able to be on the bus, which is an unbelievable mistake from me. But those bus trips are really fantastic. Obviously, kind of the coaches and the owners or whoever's traveling, we sit near the front and we have a good time chatting and sharing stories and getting to know each other. But there's a lot of fun to be had on the bus. Obviously, there's some really long journeys and it's tough. Even just like we went to Boston Bolts playing at Brandeis, and when we're stuck in traffic for, we show up like an hour before the game. All these things, it's very non-league, right? It's very semi-pro. It's everything you think it is. The buses we do have nice buses. Don't get me wrong, but when you're on them for 5, 6, 7 hours, it's not that comfortable. So again, like the away games are real. They're such a grind, and I don't know if we played terribly well in too many away games. And it's because it's just difficult. It's such a grind. We would usually have like either a terrible first half and not terrible, but we'd struggle in the first half and get going second half, or we'd start really brightly and we'd fade because it's just so hard to go on the road and show up an hour and a half before the game and in the summer and step off and it's 80, 90 degrees and your preparation's just not great. So the road trip, you need a bit of life and energy because they are a grind.
I can mention that post Western Mass, there is a podcast that exists that happened with myself and Tom Proctor that will never be released. So that is the second United in Green podcast that will probably never be released. So uh, we appreciated that one bus trip for the fans and seeing the players come off the bus while we were chanting them down from the Portuguese club was just the reactions on their face when they got off the bus was enough for us for the entire season, I think.
Yeah, and sorry, I don't mean to interject, but the Western Mass thing, like when you talk about lower league in the US, that was it, right? Having a small, in theory, small cohort of your fans traveling, but in reality, it was a large cohort, right? Um, being able to share in a moment with the club like that, and obviously there's a national championship to talk about, but arguably the biggest moments in the club's history was that night, and having the diehards there to share it with the players, like that would have been a great night no matter what, given the result. But without the fans there, I think it would have just been a great night. It ended up being, probably along with the national championship, the best night that a lot of us associated with the club will ever experience, um, because that is what it's about, like being on the road when it's not open to everyone, it's open to the ones who are really gonna, there's a thing obviously in professional football across the world where the away fans, they're the real diehards, right? For obvious reasons, because it costs more money to go on the road, it costs more time, there's travel, all that. But that's why the connection's so strong, and we needed people that night, right? Because it was again backs to the wall, and just such a special memory that bus that was taken and the Portuguese club, all of it. It couldn't have you couldn't have written a better script or environment for that night. So I think that's got a big part of the story, in terms of lower league, in our club.
Now, Mike kind of touched on it about, kind of looking forward to next year. We've got the Open Cup that's coming up. In your mind, how big of an obvious slam dunk would it be to have Vermont Green play Mike's favorite team to hate, the
Yeah, I
Portland
mean,
Times, either
you know,
here
I
at
don't have any
Merchant
insight
Field
and I don't have
or in
anything to
Portland?
go off. But
And
if
like,
you were
because I
writing a
mean,
script, that's what you do,
how
wouldn't you?
great of an
You'd put the
atmosphere
two,
would that game be?
biggest little clubs in the
Truly.
country, and you'd make them play each other. And obviously, geographically, it makes sense. Um, trend wise, it makes sense, but I don't know how all that works. I'm just excited to play any professional team. Obviously, that one would be a lot of fun because you got to respect everything they're doing out there and how they've done it. And, for me, competitively, I think as a coach, I'd love a shot at them because they've done so well. Out of respect, I'd love to have a go at them. And I'd love to talk shit to Nate Messer in a game. That'd be like one of my favourite things to do. I love Messer, I shouldn't say that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how the draw works or anything like that, but, that would be a dream matchup for a lot of people, right? I think it'd be a dream matchup for US soccer in the Open Cup itself. That would be probably one of the biggest first round games in the history of the competition.
Yeah, and Chris, I actually chatted with Nate, and he said that he thinks that would be the best atmosphere in all of like American soccer, including MLS and all that. So, well, hopefully we will get that. But I mean, also just for you to now be able to, lead a team into a tournament with such history as the U.S. Open Cup, obviously, getting comparisons to the FA Cup over in England. I guess what's it just mean to you as a coach to be able to lead a team into an historic tournament and, like you said, potentially get the opportunity to go up against some kind of professional or higher division clubs?
Yeah, no, it'd be fantastic. I mean, I'm not going to lie, there was a temptation to, win an undefeated national championship and hang my hat up, to be honest, and be like, what else are you going to do? There's two things that made me decide I want to do it again. That was one, the competitiveness of myself trying to win a second national championship, and it was the Open Cup. The chance to coach in the Open Cup, like you just explained so well, the history, the meaning of it. I think for me that would be an amazing moment. One of the best experiences outside of this summer was the last Open Cup run when, I think we advanced from the first round and we had, even when we lost, it was still a historic night, it was a great night. And that really whet my appetite for, really trying to prove how good not only USL2 clubs can be, but college soccer players can be. Because I think there's a narrative in this country over the last few years that, you don't get good players in college anymore, and I don't agree with it whatsoever. I think there are reasons why MLS clubs are looking elsewhere outside the college, and that's probably a podcast for a different day. But that Open Cup game in the first round a couple of years ago, that was so pivotal to proving that there's tremendous college players in this country, and there's tremendous coaches in this country as well, including Adam, right? Adam, along with myself and the other guys who were part of that staff, we did a number on a professional team. There's no doubt, and that was one of the best feelings I've had, and I'd love the chance to do it as a head coach, and again, just being the person who's able to lead Vermont Green into that game, that would be definitely one of the pinnacles in my career for sure. But again, from a competitive point of view, I want to do it because I want to beat a professional team. I want to match up against great coaches and great teams, and I want to, give ourselves a chance to continue to keep Vermont Green's name, at the upper echelon of lower league football in this country, because ultimately we won the national championship and that's great, but the light shines really bright, but really quickly life moves on, and I want to make sure that our name stays up there. So I'm really excited for that. Going to be really difficult, no doubt, but again, we do have one of the craftiest and best sporting directors in the game. So the reason we were able to advance last time is because he was seemingly the only person in the country who knew he could use college players, and he masterminded that. And so, you know, if anyone can put together a squad to make me look good, it's him.
You know, I love the Open. I love the Open Cup. The two matches we got to see at Virtue Field were some of the coldest and some of the fondest memories that I have. Especially like you talked about earlier, I got to experience with my daughter. My son goes to the games and he runs around with his friends because he's 12 or 13 years old. My daughter and I have a connection. She's my firstborn, but I did want to mention that, like, for there are a couple of our supporters group members who have children that were born into Vermont Green. Our friends Jason and one of our co-hosts Will, who hasn't been on the pod this season because he did have a newborn, and he's just off being super dad. And his son has actually been to a few games already, so that's it's just amazing. But the U.S. Open Cup, when we invite Portland down to Virtue Field, and when we destroy them and all of their hopes of winning an Open Cup, it's going to be an amazing scene at Virtue Field. But I think what some of our listeners do want to hear is, what are your plans for next season? And do you see us having a large turnover in our roster, um, or do you see a lot of returning players coming in that might be able to help out? I think that a lot of the fans of Vermont Green that kind of jumped on the bus last year don't necessarily understand the turnover that happens in USL too, and they don't understand necessarily the way that USL two kind of works. So, do you expect a lot of returning players, and do you expect a large turnover because of the returning players from the past couple of seasons?
Yeah, I mean, still a lot to be determined, obviously, as a professional preseason start this weekend. And there are some guys who are testing the waters here or there, and there's obviously guys who are, maybe got opportunities like homegrown deals and stuff like that. So the draft and like this period is always like a tough time for us because there's a lot of uncertainty. We obviously had some guys that we thought we might get back, get drafted or sign deals and stuff like that. And then some of them are not sure if they're signing the deals yet. So I think we'll have a good core coming back of guys that were part of this, but we'll also have hefty turnover as well. Obviously, Musa, Zach Zengi, people like that, Maxi Kissel, who are going on to hopefully really strong professional careers. Even guys who came in at the end, like, Nathan Simeon and people like that, Owens obviously signed. So I think there'll be a large turnover because there always is, but I'm hopeful that we'll get a really strong core of experienced guys from this past year back who either, it was their first year and because we had a lot of young guys, you look at like, and this is not me saying who's coming back and who's not, but if you look at the team, there was a lot of guys who were quite early in their college careers, which is a little unusual, that have still got 2-3 years left of college. So, we're trying to get as many at the top guys back that we can. Obviously, there'll be guys who maybe start out in professional environments and maybe it doesn't work out and they need a place to be in the summer while they keep their options open. That we've always been a good place for that. But we'll see. I think one thing that is really important is USL2 scares college coaches, right? Because of the load and the amount of games over the summer and stuff like that. But this was probably the best year we've ever had as an advertisement for what we do with Vermont Green, in terms of Zach Zengi, the number one true believer of all time, I would call him. Basically playing every game, refusing to be rotated even when we talked about it, convincing me to no end that he can play every single minute of every single game, and going on and having a first team All-American season, and arguably could have, should have been the national player of the year, right? So obviously Zengi's a freak. Not everyone can do what Zach Zengi does, but he showed that, and this is where I love and respect Zengi to the end of days is, his argument was, if I want to be a top professional player, I've got to be robust enough to play every single game. And I need to prove that. And he showed the more he played, the better he was. Musa the same, right? You don't rotate Musa because he'll kill you, right? He won't talk to you for the entire time if you even mention rotating him. But, guys who played down the stretch in the playoffs, Alex Hall, Gabe Fernandez, go on and win a national championship for Washington. Stephen GK having a great season. Enzo, Arnaud, there's so many of them. Obviously, Hersig and people like that had great seasons. So I think that helped us a lot. Players who played a lot for us went on and had really, really good seasons. Because that allows us to show the evidence to college coaches that will enhance their college career and not pull away from it. Because we are, again, we are respectful, and we are, I'm not going to say we're smart, but we're not dumb. And we're not going to run anyone into the ground and send them back to Georgetown or Maryland or UVM or wherever they go, not ready to be the best player they can be, because that just, we would never do that to a player, because ultimately we care about the players. So I think a lot of doors have opened, one, because we won a national championship, but we can point to the evidence that we look after your players, and we will make sure they're actually thriving when they get back to you, and they're not run down, because again, we're not going to overplay anyone. There were some players that we had to play a lot because of positional things, like Brandon and Musa. We got to the end where it's like, okay, you guys are going to play all the time, but again, two lads who look after themselves really, really well, and they were able to do it. But everyone else, except for Zengi, we basically rotated, we looked after them. So I think there's some exciting players that are, that we're going after, and that are even coming after us a little bit. And so I'm confident we can put the same level of team out there, and maybe, who knows, we can make it even stronger somehow.
Yeah, and Chris, you kind of talk about an advertisement for the teams, but maybe more of an advertisement for the players is the fact that we're continuing to see players get drafted into MLS, and it's almost like you're creating almost like a Vermont Green kind of like group, or some camaraderie with the amount of players who are kind of in MLS and have been drafted. I guess for you as a coach, what's it like to be able to see the players, whether it's MLS or also too in USL, kind of be able to extend their careers and go to the professional ranks?
Amazing. We actually got sent a picture today from the MLS Rookie Symposium. I think it was 6 Vermont Green players all together, and that was that gave me chills, to be honest. To see those guys, and to hopefully realize their dreams, because that's what I don't want to get all cheesy in that, but that is what it's about. These guys are fulfilling their dreams of playing at big time Division 1 colleges, and then at the professional level, and to be part of that journey, and to hopefully help them a little bit along the way. It's such a good feeling when you see all of these guys getting drafted or signing contracts or whatever it is, or even if they just have a great college season. Like, I watched so much Division 1 soccer this year, and we were doing that anyway, but this year I was like, I couldn't get enough of every game while trying to do my own job as well. But the chance to watch all these guys thrive, I'm Georgetown's biggest supporter, Maryland's biggest supporter, Washington's biggest supporter, UVM's biggest supporter. You name it, I want all our guys to win. It's tough when they play against each other. Like when Maryland are playing Washington in the NCAA tournament, it's like, I don't know what I want to happen here. That's really difficult. But you get really close to these guys, because the one thing you do realize when you start coaching them is, it can be easy to be like, oh my God, with Zach Zengi, Georgetown player. I mean this in a nice way. They're all just kids. They're just kids. They're brilliant kids, lovely kids, but you realize they're just like anybody else, and you get really close to them, and So when you're seeing these guys fulfilling lifelong dreams, it's a little emotional, to be honest, because you know for me, again, from a biased point of view, they gave me the best summer I've ever had. They allowed me to have such a good experience coaching them, and so I feel a little indebted to some of them as well because of what they've done for me. So yeah, anything we can do to help them along the way, I feel really proud that we can even have a small step of the journey. But I do think we are a pivotal part of their development into a pro. There is no doubt about that, because as good as the college teams that they play for, we've got the best players from every team in our environments every single day in the summer, and that is what a pro environment's like, and it is ruthless. When we play game, when we're training, and I know the crowd sees everyone getting along and everyone hugging and celebrating goals, training is a war zone. These guys are killing each other because they're competitive animals. And we have to break up more than one fight throughout the summer. There's that those types of things are always happening, but there's no doubt that we're sharpening their tools. So when they get into a pro environment, they're like, this is like Vermont Green. That is the big sell to them. Come and challenge yourself against the best players in the country and see where you stack up and get better. So I think we do play a really good role, because again, you're looking at the best players at Maryland training with the best players at Washington, the best players at UVM, the best players at Providence, whatever school you want to name. It's that's a really important thing for your development as a player.
I think it was really important for me to bring my son to one of the training sessions, because he did get to see that, you know, Lee tries to kill the Vermont Green players the same way that he tries to kill him every weekend at training, and it's no different for any other player than it would be for the youth players that Lee works with every single day. And I think it's a testament to the coaching staff and to your coaching staff and Adams in the past, is that they don't treat these youth players any different than they would the USL2 players, and it really helps to develop the youth and bring them up, and when they get to see their coaches doing the same thing with these professional players, I think it pumps these kids up to play and to play at a high level.
Yeah, I mean that's something I get asked all the time. Is like, and listen, like, yeah, coach at Division 3, but I've got a pretty good Division 3 team. Like, we're a good side, but everyone's like, "Oh, do you do different stuff with them on game?" Like, no, we do the exact same things. Obviously, we put, we change the restrictions or whatever based on the ability of the player, but you coach the way you coach. But it is a really good point that the coaching staff we had this summer, Lee, Jed. We had Ben Wolfinger with the goalkeepers at the start, and then Robbie Emmett came in, and Hannah as a trainer. Like, absolute all-star staff, to be honest. Like, one, had a great time, because they were all good people. But two, like, none of us are doing this for like the money or anything like that. It's a grind every single day. When we've all got real jobs and real responsibilities and families and partners and all that. But those guys just were completely all in on the grind every day. And they did a lot of work. And, they deserve a massive amount of credit. I think unless you're like really tied into the youth scene in Vermont, you people don't understand like what Lee does or what Jed does and things like that. But both top coaches, and obviously Lee's been around a couple of years now. Jed came in for his first year, and I'd known him a while, but just brilliant coaches, and really took a lot of weight off my shoulders to make sure that the team was really prepared. So, really happy that I got to spend my summer with them, and they deserve a lot of credit for the things that they did.
Now, I know that we're kind of coming up close to time, but I did want to ask Chris, I think that we would be remiss in not asking, kind of your thoughts on Vermont being able to finally field a women's team for a full summer. Obviously, they've sold out every single game they've played. They have, I
Yeah, I
think,
mean,
was it
for me,
three
the
official
women's games have
games?
always just
They've
been like a
already
really good
developed this
time
kind of
because I get the day
really
off a
big
little bit.
following. How much are
I
you
get to
looking
enjoy the
forward to
food
being able
trucks
to see
and maybe a couple
a
of beers
Vermont
at the
Green
game and
women's
stuff like that.
team
And I get to be a fan,
field kind of full time next
because
summer?
that's the one thing is, you know, obviously under the pressure and the scrutiny of our games, I don't always enjoy them. So it's nice to kind of sit up in the press box and enjoy myself and be a Vermont Green fan. Listen, it's going to be brilliant. I think the more high level football that comes to Vermont, the better. I think, it's really important to, and I probably won't use the right words or terms here, but it's really important that the youth in Vermont get to see people who look like them, right? So if you're a young girl in Vermont, yeah, you probably support Vermont Green, you like the team, but you'd love to see a women's player, right? And I think the inspiration that that'll bring, it's only going to make soccer in Vermont stronger. It's only going to make the community in Vermont stronger. And, I've got to hope that, we don't have men's fans and women's fans. We just have Vermont Green fans. And that's going to be a big commitment for the fans, right? If you've got a full slate for both men and women, but, that it's if you're going to have the best women's players in the country coming to Vermont, what is there any debate that we would be the capital of soccer of the United States then, because we already feel like we are, but add in the best women's players as well, which I'm sure. And to be clear, I have like no, I have no involvement with the women's side of it. Like I don't know what's going on or anything like that. But I know that they're gonna do it with the same level of care and the same drive that they've done for the men's team. So that's going to be really exciting to see, and I'll be really excited to see some of the best women's college players in the country play at Virtue, and it just shows the club continuing to grow. Right, it shows we're a proper club that is going to make sure that we hit all corners in terms of being a proper community club. It shouldn't just be about like a men's team. It should be about everyone being represented, and I think that's going to be really special. And I think we'll see, you know, we're going to see a really great role modeling from that team for the youth, and it's going to be really exciting. And hopefully, it's going to cause a lot of stress for people in the ownership or administration or front office or whatever you want to call them, because their workload's going to quadruple. But what a great problem to have if we can host, back-to-back games and host playoff games and stuff like that, and just again touch wood, hopefully continue the winning tradition that Vermont's had over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think that having twice the workload that they already have is like you said a big thing for this community, for the fans, and for the folks who just have been and didn't even know it, football starved for their entire lives. This club has done so much for this community, and to bring folks together who, one, were soccer fans, and two, were not soccer fans, to bring them together. I think that what the founders, owners, whatever you would like to call them, have done here in Burlington, Vermont, is it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It does exist in other places, and we do love to believe that Vermont is the soccer capital of the world, and it was for a small amount of time, but of course there is the future, and I think New England, I think being the leaders in soccer right now in the United States, I think is a very good thing because the Northeast doesn't get enough credit for for what they do for sport around this country, and I think that when we talk um, with our next guests next week, I think we're gonna talk about soccer outside of New England. So it's going to be interesting to see from their perspective where the game is going in the United States and how their game translates into what we see here in New England. Chris, I really want to thank you for coming back on. It's been an amazing time tonight. I can't say enough how easy it is to talk to you and to get honest answers from honest questions. So it's been a really great time tonight. And I just want to make sure that everybody, if you can, we are United in Green podcast. We are supported by the Blazing Musket. The Blazing Musket is a soccer website that features all of your favorite New England teams from Vermont Green all the way up through the MLS team in outside Boston for now. Uh, that's another podcast for another time. But if you can, please go out and subscribe to their paid tier. You get a lot of great content from them through both tiers. But like, if you can, please support them. Independent soccer journalists are the backbone of our sport and how it gets out to the masses. So. Again, I want to thank you, Chris, for being here. Tyson and Sam, as usual, you guys are amazing, and you keep me grounded every single week. So, love and respect all of you guys, and I just want everybody to go out there and make sure you protect your mental health and be safe out there. And outside of that, up the green.
Green.